Just after dawn on the 25th of April 1915, under the cover of a formidable naval bombardment, thousands of British troops made their way towards land. In front of them, entrenched along these cliffs, Ottoman riflemen waited, poised to defend their homeland at all costs. It was the beginning of a brutal fight, which would last for 8 months and cost tens of thousands of lives.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Okay guys, we're going to be seeing a video today. This is titled The Impossible Landing at Gallipoli. This is 25th April 1915. All right guys, this looks like a small history. All right, so without further ado, please subscribe to the channel. Let's go check this video out.
Just after dawn on the 25th of April 1915, under the cover of a formidable naval bombardment, thousands of British troops made their way towards land. In front of them, entrenched along these cliffs, Ottoman riflemen waited, poised to defend their homeland at all costs. It was the beginning of a brutal fight, which would last for 8 months and cost tens of thousands of lives. In this video, the third in partnership with the Gallipoli Association, we'll explore the story of that very first day across all 5 landing beaches in the area known as Cape Helles, and with modern and historic imagery and the testimony of those who were there, retell an episode which history remembers as the Gallipoli landings. When war becomes static along the Western Front in late 1914, decision makers in London looked to break the deadlock by opening up a new battlefront. Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, advocated for an attack against the Ottoman Empire by using the Royal Navy to force the Dardanelles Straits. The Allied objective was, by capturing Constantinople, to force Germany's ally, Turkey, and its Ottoman Empire out of the war. The British and French naval actions that culminated on the 18th of March 1915 failed in their attempts to force a path through the Dardanelles, and so a land campaign was planned. Its purpose was to destroy the forts, gun batteries and minefields protecting the strait, and once neutralised, for the Navy to continue its mission to capture the Turkish capital.
Wow.
The Cape Helles amphibious landing on the 25th of April 1915 was only part of the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force's attack on the Gallipoli Peninsula. At the same time, the Anzacs, men of the Australian New Zealand Army Corps, would be landing about 20 kilometres to the north at Gaba Tepe, and the French on the Asian shore at Kumkale. Helles would not be a dawn surprise landing like that at Gaba Tepe, but a daylight one to give the Royal Navy the best chance of destroying the Ottoman defences. The main landing would be spearheaded by the British 29th Division. At Cape Helles, the British would land on a wide front across 5 beaches. For the operation, these would be given the code names S, V, W, X and Y. Once the beaches had been secured, there would be a breakout to capture the vital high ground of Achi Baba, and then, supported by the Royal Naval Division and a French division, the Allies would advance up the peninsula to secure the key heights of the Kilid Bar Plateau. Here they would join up with the Anzacs, neutralise the forts to allow the combined Anglo-French to steam through to Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, to knock Turkey out of the war. Let's take a closer look at the terrain. What will stand out straight away are the low, rugged cliffs that enclose the beaches before they open into farmland that gently slopes up to the heights of Achi Baba in the distance. Inland, the fields interspersed with scrub, small woods and olive groves, divided in places by streams and deep ravines that stretch down into the sea. The beaches themselves were little more than narrow strips of sand, ideal for defence but very difficult to attack. Now let's look at who was holding this coastline. The responsibility for defending the southern tip of Gallipoli fell to Colonel Halil Sami Bey's Ottoman 9th Division. Rather than attempting to guard the whole coastline with continuous defences, the Ottomans used a policy of mobile defence. Here, at Cape Helles, the 26th Regiment had deployed their forces from Semeli Tepe to Morto Bay, with the 25th Regiment in reserve on the Kilid Bar Plateau. The 26th Regiment was stretched out to say the least. Between Y Beach and S Beach, the coastal defences were mainly left to one battalion of a little over 1,000 men, supported by an engineer company. The beach defences comprised of barbed wire, trenches, pom-pom guns and field artillery. Tripwire was laid under the surf line, mines were buried on the beaches, and any natural obstacle that could afford cover to the attackers was in the process of being removed. The most heavily concentrated defences were on V and W beaches, where the Ottomans expected the main attack to happen. Against this, General Sir Ian Hamilton, commanding the MEF, pitched the bulk of the 29th Division, around 14,000 men, under the command of the recently promoted Major General Sir Aimler Hunter Weston. At that time, Gallipoli would be the largest amphibious landing in living history. A most difficult task at the best of times, but exacerbated by little more than a month to plan and the knowledge that the landing would be opposed. The amphibious assault was supported by the Royal Navy, which provided the craft to land the army and, crucially, provide fire support for the attacking forces' daylight landing. Whilst the bombardment would certainly alert the Ottomans to the pending landing, it was thought that the weight and accuracy of the naval bombardment would afford the best chance of success against the fortified positions. Let's understand the locality of those beaches and how they connected a little better. At S Beach, on the easternmost flank overlooking the entrance to the Dardanelles, the British objective was to capture an Ottoman observation post that was positioned as a disused gun battery known as Ditots. At Y Beach, about 5 kilometers away on the Aegean coast, the objective was to secure this seaward flank. Once both beaches had been captured, the assaulting forces in S and Y beaches were under orders to wait until the main body had come ashore on the tip of Cape Helles to join them. Across Cape Helles were 3 beaches, V, W and X, the first 2 of which were known to be heavily defended. It would be on V and W where the main battle would be fought, one which would go into the annals of British military history as a heroic but bloody landing. By nightfall on the 24th of April 1915, that massive invasion fleet had assembled off the shore of Cape Helles with thousands of men anxiously preparing their kits, equipment, writing last letters home and no doubt praying for a favourable outcome come the dawn. Ashore in their trenches, Ottoman sentries looked on in awe as the sea before them filled with ships. The scene was set for the first D-Day. From here on, we'll follow the action on the ground, beach by beach, as the British made their attempts to gain a vital foothold on the Gallipoli Peninsula. Right here on S Beach, 3 companies of the 2nd Battalion South Wales Borderers, approximately 750 men, stormed ashore supported by engineers, medics and a few Marines. Lieutenant Robert Cead of HMS Vengeance was amongst those watching the battle unfurl. At 5 AM, as if the very heavens had been rent asunder, every ship opened fire simultaneously on its allotted area. We simply hammered away for all we were worth. Trawlers and boats, which had been secured to the ship astern of us, now crowded with the South Wales Borderers, made for the end of the sandy patch just inside Morto Bay. They were met by a hail of bullets that killed several men, and therefore they withdrew for a short time, during which we increased our rate of fire. The trawlers then came round the south part of Ditots at 6:30 AM. Another attempt was made, and, in spite of heavy fire, the men landed and climbed up the side of the cliff. It was splendid to see them with their bayonets flashing in the sun, making the ascent, a sight never to be forgotten. Despite fierce resistance from a platoon of Ottoman defenders, in just a few minutes the beach and Ditots were taken with very few casualties. But could that success be repeated on the other beaches? On the northwestern side of the Helles landing area, the assault on Y Beach also began well. With the troops first ashore at 5:30 AM, this coup de main operation was a total surprise to the Ottoman. They didn't believe a landing here would be attempted, so left the beach undefended. 2 battalions, Plymouth Battalion, Royal Marine Light Infantry, and 1st Battalion, King's Own Scottish Borderers, supported by a company from the South Wales Borderers, landed unhindered. A patrol even reached as far as the village of Crithea just here, an objective that was destined never to be reached again. But the landing was not the problem. The issue was that the force's objective lacked clarity, which was complicated by misunderstandings and disagreements between the 2 commanding officers on the ground. Lieutenant Colonel Matthews of the Royal Marines and Archibald Coe of the Borderers both thought they were in charge of proceedings, but neither was willing to act under the other's orders. What they did agree on was the realisation that the opportunity was being thrown away, and twice they asked divisional headquarters for orders but received no reply. By mid-afternoon, and realising that there was no movement from the south at Cape Helles, Matthews withdrew his patrols and dug a semicircular defensive perimeter to cover the beach and waited. It was barely an hour later that the Ottomans discovered this force and, realising its threat to their lines of communication, immediately sent a reserve battalion to attack. Fierce close-quarter fighting went on during the late afternoon and into the night, which made things increasingly difficult for the British. Coe was mortally wounded, ammunition was running low, and casualties quickly mounted. During the night, some of the Marines and borderers straggled back to the beach, and by the following morning, seeing boats headed towards the shore, they thought an evacuation had been ordered. It had not. The boats were for bringing more ammunition and extracting the wounded. By the time the mistake was realised, it was too late, and a general order to evacuate was given. In the fog of battle, the British left Y Beach, much to the Ottoman surprise. Leaving their dead behind, it would not be the last Gallipoli evacuation. The combined forces at S and Y Beach actually outnumbered the Ottoman defenders south of Achibaba. However, no consideration was given to reinforcing the success at these beaches, opportunities lost that would cost the British dearly. Meanwhile, further south towards the tip of Cape Helles, the landing on X Beach had also begun well. This beach is little more than a shallow gouge in the coastline, with a narrow strip of sand less than 200 metres long and only 7 metres deep, all nestled below a 70-metre scrub-covered escarpment. X Beach was assaulted by the 2nd Battalion Royal Fusiliers, whose task, once ashore, was capturing Hill 114, where it would link up with the Lancashire Fusiliers on W Beach. Here, the covering fire of HMS Implacable, which blasted the cliffs at point-blank range, was very effective, and the beach's 12 Ottoman defenders did not hang around long, allowing the Fusiliers to get ashore by 6:30 AM without loss. The battalion's commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Newenham, wrote, "We got off very lightly while getting ashore. I can only put it down largely to the way our mothership plastered the beach for us at close range. However, we had our bad time later on. About 100 yards from the shore, the launches cast us off and we rowed in for all we were worth, till the boats grounded, then jumped into the water up to our chests in some places, waded ashore and swarmed up the cliff." One staff officer later remarked that the landing differs from some others. "I recollect a bright sunny morning, dead calm sea, not a shot fired. I had a bag in one hand, coat over my arm, and was assisted down a plank from the boat by an obliging sailor, so that I should not wet my boots. The only thing missing was the hotel." The landing was another success, but as Newenham suggested, the bad time would develop later. The beach, as well as Hill 114, was secured with few casualties. A defensive perimeter was established with the help of the Border Regiment and Enniskillen Fusiliers, just in time to be hammered by almost ceaseless Ottoman counterattacks. Pressure was kept on the Fusiliers and their reinforcements for the remainder of the day. Now let's look at W Beach, which was the first of the real bloody landings. The beach here is the largest and consists of an arcing strip of deep powdery sand about 320 metres in length and approximately 27 metres deep, with steep cliffs either side. The ground then rises gently through sand dunes that then runs up steeply to a low ridge. Tripwires had been placed in the surf line and mines planted on the beach. Behind this were 2 belts of barbed wire, surrounded by trenches that looked down onto the beach from the cliffs and low ridge. Despite some contemporary accounts to the contrary, there were no machine guns covering W Beach, just a company of Ottoman riflemen. Regardless, the defences were still formidable. Spearheading the landing was the 1st Battalion Lancashire Fusiliers, who, after securing the beach, were to break out left to join up with the Royal Fusiliers on X Beach, and then right to meet up with those on V. To give the best chance of success, a short but intense 30-minute naval bombardment was to precede the landings, to lift some 10 minutes before the boats hit the shore. Unfortunately, this lull in the bombardment was to give the Turkish defenders vital time to prepare to meet the landing. Whilst the sight of the naval bombardment was undoubtedly reassuring, it was largely ineffective against the entrenched positions. Not only did it end 10 minutes before the Fusiliers landed, but the flat trajectory of naval gunnery meant that most shells either exploded into the cliffs or fell too far inland. The boats unknowingly approached the killing zone, where 90 metres from the beach, a fusillade of rifle fire was unleashed. Those that had not been killed or wounded in the boats gallantly jumped into the water. The men struggled waist deep, exacerbated by the weight of their equipment, the tripwires, beach mines, and a deep belt of wire. Major George Adams, Lancashire Fusiliers, recalled that moment. A very heavy and brisk fire was poured into us, several officers and men being killed and wounded in the entanglements, through wire which we were trying to cut away. Several of my company were with me under the wire. One of my subalterns was killed next to me, and also the wire cutter who was lying the other side of me. I seized his cutter and cut a small lane myself, through which a few of us broke and lined up under the only available cover procurable, a small sand ridge covered with bluffs of grass. I then ordered fire to be opened on the crests, but owing to submersion in the water and dragging rifles through the sand, the breech mechanism was clogged, thereby rendering the rifles ineffective. The only thing left to do was fix bayonets and charge up the crests, which was done in a very gallant manner, though we suffered great.
This is really a tough one. Like, this video just kept me mute all through. Like, I was just like the cause of this war was battle was actually is actually pointless to me. Like, not enough reason for the lives that were lost. Like, I mean, guys, please let me, maybe it's because I don't know much about this, but from this video, I just feel sorry for everyone who have lost their lives in the course of this battle. Like, the battle is really, really pointless to me. Okay, it's really pointless to me.
In doing so. However, this had the effect of driving the enemy from his trenches, which were immediately occupied. The commander of the covering force, Brigadier General Stuart Hare, who was leading the second wave, witnessed the Fusiliers' plight. He could see that a further landing on W Beach was senseless, and, thinking quickly, he ordered the remaining boats to row to the left-hand side of the beach under the cover of the cliffs. Outflanking the Ottomans, the general and his men scrambled up a steep slope through a gap in the defences, forcing the remaining defenders to flee. Unfortunately, Hare was wounded in the action, but through his initiative and that of his officers like Adams, a landing had been effected. By 8 AM, W Beach had been secured. 6 Victoria Crosses were awarded to the Lancashire Fusiliers for that landing. In an unusual but not unprecedented military decision, the survivors were asked to elect 6 recipients for the award because it was felt that the battalion comprised equally brave and distinguished people. The 6 VCs before breakfast, as they famously became known, were awarded to Major Cuthbert Bromley, Captain Richard Willis, Sergeant Alfred Richards, Sergeant Frank Stubbs, Corporal John Grimshaw and Private William Keneally, 3 of whom would never leave Gallipoli. The cost to the battalion that landed with 25 officers and 918 men was 15 officers and 411 other ranks, a shocking 55% casualties. Their feat passed into the folklore of this English county, and as a testimony to the gallantry of the Fusiliers, W Beach was renamed Lancashire Landing. The landing at V Beach was undoubtedly the bloodiest of them all. Defensive trenches and wire once again had been placed to disrupt any advance from the shoreline, while an Ottoman rifle company, supported by 4 pom-pom, quick-firing 37mm Maxim Nordenfeld guns, had established a semicircular defensive position between Fort Ertugrul on the cliffs along the ridge to Hill 141 and down to Sedilbar Castle. The Ottoman defenders had a clear field of fire from this natural bowl-shaped amphitheatre down to a 270-metre wide, narrow and gently sloping beach. The British plan was to land 4 battalions by 8 AM, and after the capture of the village of Sedilbar, advance with their comrades on W and X beaches to take Krithia by noon and Achibaba by nightfall. At first light, the Navy began bombarding the beach defences. An hour later, 3 companies from the 1st Battalion Royal Dublin Fusiliers were towed to shore in a string of rowing boats. Following behind was a 4,000-ton converted steam collier, the River Clyde, which would be beached. Then, from within, its hidden cargo of 2,000 men from the Royal Munster Fusiliers and Hampshire Regiment would charge ashore. The River Clyde was used like a modern Trojan horse, an idea conceived by Commander Edward Unwin, who assumed command of the ship. 8 sally ports had been cut into her side to allow the men to disembark via gangways, protected by covering fire from 11 Maxim machine guns manned by volunteers from the Royal Naval Armoured Car Division. The tows carrying the Dublins hit the beach just moments before the River Clyde rammed itself ashore, all to the utter amazement of the Ottoman defenders. Manning one of the River Clyde's Maxim guns was Petty Officer David Fife. There was a jar that quivered from end to end of the ship, and she was aground. Up till now, not a shot had been fired from the shore, and indeed we had begun to wonder whether the landing was to be unopposed. Then suddenly, the whole slope leapt into a roar of firing, and a tempest of lead poured down. Nothing could live in such a torrent of lead. Pinned down on the beach, the Dublin's commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Ruth, was already dead, and Father William Finn, the Roman Catholic chaplain, who was doing what he could for the wounded, also became a victim of the intense Ottoman fire. They died together and are today buried side by side. As more boats drew nearer to the beach, a continued hail of rifle fire took its toll. Those ashore and lucky enough to reach a 2-metre-high sandbank sheltered behind it, the only cover that afforded any protection against the ferocious Ottoman fire. As more boats rowed to the shore, they were met with the same maelstrom of fire, cutting men down before they even reached the beach. Some were killed outright, others drowned or were pulled under by the weight of their equipment. Between those drowning men, boats floated helplessly in the water with their dead and dying crews. Of the 700 Dublins, only 300 reached the beach, many of them wounded. The grounded River Clyde was powerless, and being beached too far from the shore, needed a bridge of boats to be formed to connect the ship to the shore. Without this, its precious cargo of men could not even disembark. Thanks to the bravery of volunteers aboard the River Clyde, who, under fire, dived into the sea, they eventually managed through grim determination to connect a string of drifting boats together to make a precarious path to the shore. Once connected, the order was given for the infantrymen to leave the ship. Immediately, the men of the Munsters opened the doorways, cut into the superstructure, and began to run down the gangways towards the lighters. Petty Officer David Fife saw what happened next. We could hear splash after splash as the gallant fellows fell dead from the gangway. A few, however, reached the nearest barge, raced across her open deck and crouched for shelter in the adjacent open boat. One after another, the devoted fellows made a dash down the gangways until a considerable number gathered in the bottoms of the open boats or were lying prostrate on the deck of the barge. Then the order was given, and up they leapt and rushed for the rocks while a hail of rifle and machine gun fire beat upon them. Wildly they leapt from boat to boat in that gallant rush, while we on the ship cheered wildly at the sight, until they reached the last boat, where they leapt down into the water and started wading toward the rocks that were their goal, holding up their rifles high above their heads. But to our horror, we saw them suddenly begin to flounder and fall in the water, disappearing from view and struggling to the surface again, with uniform and pack streaming, only to go down again, never to reappear, as the hailing bullets flicked the life out of the struggling men. We almost wept with impotent rage. Captain Guy Geddes, a company commander in the Munsters, recalled, "We all made, Dublins and all, for a sheltered ledge on the shore which gave us cover. Here we shook ourselves out and tried to appreciate the situation, a rather sorry one. I estimated that I had lost about 70% of my company." Due to the ferocious Ottoman fire, mountain casualties and sheer exhaustion, the brave volunteers in the waters were struggling to keep the bridge of boats together. The Ottomans were concentrating their murderous fire at the sally port, knowing that the men would be emerging from there. It was clear that the position was hopeless. The landing had failed. For these extraordinary acts of self-sacrifice, there were 6 Victoria Crosses awarded to members of the Royal Navy that day at V Beach. Captain Edward Unwin, Midshipman George Drury, Midshipman Wilfred Mallison, Able Seaman William Williams, Seaman George Sampson, and Sub-Lieutenant Arthur Tisdall. Casualties on V Beach were heavier than any other beach that day. Senior officers too paid a heavy price. Of the 3 Brigadier Generals of the 29th Division, 1 was killed, the other 2 were wounded. So great was the depression amongst senior command that one staff officer said that he had great difficulty in dissuading Major General Hunter Weston from going himself to V Beach to lead the men to the attack. When generals and staff officers are leading attacks, you know that something has gone terribly wrong. Fortunately, Hunter Weston, after consultation with General Sir Ian Hamilton, saw fit to suspend the V Beach landing. Only with approaching darkness of the night could both sides take a breather and the wounded be treated. Officers, now reinforced by those still on board the River Clyde, began to reorganise. By midnight, over 2,000 men had reached the stretch of sand with hardly a casualty. The Ottomans were not beaten and counterattacked. Whilst this ultimately failed, it shocked the British, who now believed that the numbers holding the beach defences were far greater than they actually were. Major Marmot's 26th Regiment, 9th Ottoman Division, was one of those defending V Beach. He recalled the steadfast speech that he gave to the officers and men. They were told that the fate of the nation depended on them that night, that if they were able to gain time for our army by stopping the enemy's advance, we would have completed our task. It was explained that every hour which we were able to remain here would assist our army in gaining a victory, and it would result in a crushing defeat for the enemy. And it would have been a total disaster for the British had it not been for the bravery shown in the fight for the beaches. Staff officers on board the River Clyde now hatched a plan to break out from the beach in the morning. At dawn on the 26th of April, the assaulting parties charged up from the beach, pushing back the few remaining Ottoman defenders. But it came at a cost of losing two more staff officers, Captain Garth Walford and Lieutenant Colonel Charles Doughty Wiley. Both were awarded the Victoria Cross for their bravery on the morning of the 26th of April 1915. A third VC would go to Corporal William Cosgrove of the Munsters, who, despite being wounded, stood up in clear view of the enemy to clear a path through the barbed wire. General Sir Ian Hamilton said of the Hellas landings that no finer feat of arms had ever been achieved by the British soldier or any other soldier than the storming of these trenches from open boats on the morning of April the 25th. Despite all the courage shown during the daylight landings on V and W beaches, and what can only be described as lost opportunities on S and Y, it's all too easy to state in hindsight what might have been. What cannot be ignored is that the best part of the 29th Division was thwarted by the unexpected, dogged and determined resistance of the Ottoman defenders. Despite their own heavy casualties, they had stubbed out any British opportunity to advance, pinning them to the beaches for most of the first 24 hours, the most critical time of any amphibious operation. With the loss of so many British senior officers, command and control had certainly broken down, and by nightfall, most of the battalions in the 29th Division were in disarray, demoralised and in a confused state of shock. No one had expected such fierce defence. Because of this, the advance on Achibaba would not begin for another 48 hours, an objective that, despite 8 further months of the campaign, was destined never to be reached.
Wow, guys, this is a lot. This is a touching battle. Like, this battle has taken a life of young, vibrant heroes. Young, vibrant heroes. Like, rest in peace to all of you. I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to say. War and battle is a very wicked thing, regardless of who is right or who is wrong. At the end of the day, lives will be taken down. And that's not just a good thing. Sometimes I just wish there is actually a way they can actually resolve conflicts, resolve issues without having to like go to war and start killing and all of that. Like, I just wish, I just wish there's a way of settlement without killing. I don't know. I feel sorry for all those who lost their life in the course of this. I am really, really sorry. Rest in peace to all of you. Please let me know more about this history, the fall of Gallipoli, in the comment section, so I get to understand more. If there are things that were not mentioned in this video that you feel okay, this video did not cover this part, please let us know in the comment section so we can all learn. All right, thank you for watching, thank you for recommending, and see you guys on my next one. Bye.